2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Wait, let me turn some microphones on. Welcome to GrokTALK. We are back. It is Saturday morning. It is May 16th, 2015. I was driving in today, as I always do, and I'm thinking about these things. And, of course, last week we had Kimberly on talking about the race between Maureen Mann and Yvonne Bailey. And, of course, one of the things that the Democrats had built into their narrative was that, Yvonne's young, she's inexperienced, she doesn't own a home, and it occurred to me that a significant and meaningful number of Democrat-registered voters in New Hampshire don't own a home here either.
No, in fact, a fair number of them don't even pay for those homes.
And then it occurred to me that there was a college student from Vermont who was a Democrat who was voted in at a local election on a border town in New Hampshire, and they didn't have a problem with that either.
Yeah, or out by Keene State, where she became treasurer.
Right, that's
of the
what I'm
county.
talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then never showed up.
Right. So that's perfectly fine. No problems. Well, what are you busting on her for? Hello, hypocrisy.
Yeah, well, they complain about the diversity in the Republican Party, so then when one of them shows up, it blows their narrative.
Well, like we said last week, this Yvonne Bailey, if she was a Democrat, she would be their little 21st century legislator goddess. She's the future of politics in New Hampshire.
Well,
she's a Republican, so they got to crap all over her.
Well, almost. She'd have to be pro-choice.
She'd have to be a Democrat. That's all she'd have to be. If she was a Democrat, everything else about her, which means Democrat policies, of course, would be just dandy. But that's not the case. Anyway, I want to let you know who's going to be on the program today. Jazz Shaw from Hot Air will be on in a wee bit. David Bozell from For America, and we're going to talk to him about why we need to anoint. That's not the word I'm looking for. Why we need to nominate a conservative in the race for the presidency. Max Abramson's coming in to talk about a special election, not the one necessarily we just mentioned, but there's one coming up on the seacoast. And Jorge Mesa Tejada will be with us in moments, about quarter after, to talk about an education update. We're going to talk about union teachers and their impact on school budgets.
Oh, yes, we can talk about that.
That's definitely going to be a good subject. But
because it only ratchets upward.
We got a few minutes before that starts to talk about whatever we want.
Oh, there's just so much going on in the world as usual. So, how's the Senate finally come down on the trade promotion authority or whatever it's called where they give the president the ability to do almost what he wants with almost treaties in terms of free trade?
They passed it. I thought there was going to be based on some of the rumors of what I have heard in this, that there's corporate sovereignty, which would mean there's an international tribunal that could override U.S. laws in terms of these foreign companies, that a guest worker program was going to be put into place which could not be disputed, which basically says, hey, let's flood the border from the west and not just from the south.
Yeah,
and I keep thinking, who the heck's watching out for Americans?
Right. Well, I'm actually all for free trade. All the research that's ever been done by reputable, that is non-democrat institutions, says that free trade is good for the economy and everybody profits, not just the foreigners. The problem is when you get free trade so-called agreements negotiated by Democrats, it tends to do stuff that shouldn't be in a trade agreement, like try to dictate to foreign countries how they should run their workforce on the one hand, and in some cases, as we suspect may happen here, allow Obama to put agreements in place that we are committed to that would be very bad for us, such as agreements to reduce carbon or, as you say, guest worker programs.
Yeah, the trade, the TPA that's now in process, I mean, you'd think that it would congressional critter. And I forget who this was. It might have been Dianne Feinstein or Barbara Boxer, led into this secret room. No cameras, no phone, no nothing, no notes. You get time, and it's like, and then the Obama administration thinks or doesn't understand why we get upset. I mean, you're supposed to be working on our behalf. We should understand what's in this thing, or are we going to do?
Yeah, and so the TPA and the TPP are two different things. The Trade Promotion Authority, or Fast Track, is what allows which he's negotiating, which is supposedly free trade with some number of Asian nations.
Yeah, and one's going to lead to the other. We're already saying if the Congress gives him the unfettered capability and authority that he wants, we're already seeing the evidence of what will happen.
Right, and the fact that the contents of the agreement need to be secret just tells you everything you need to know about it. Because, a trade promotion, a trade partnership should be a fairly simple, open and shut case. We agree to reduce our tariffs if you reduce yours, or we'll eliminate them if you'll reduce yours. We agree not to do certain things which might be harmful to the other guy's economy, and that's about it. Or maybe throw in some respects for patents and trademarks.
Yeah, well, that's one of the big problems that we've got going on this week. Then there's George Stephanopoulos fiasco that's now ensnaring other high-level
you mean it couldn't happen to nicer people?
Journalists?
It might take down Candy Crowley or
Could
some
we
of those
call it
others?
the Stephan Octopus?
I like that. Well, also, Greta Van Susteren has been caught in that. She's given money to the Clintons, she of Fox News fame. And it just proves what the
stated aims of the Clinton Foundation, as opposed to what it gets used for, could have easily ensnared some celebrities in the early days. The question is, did she fail to declare it? Did they fail to declare it? That's where you start to get into judgy behavior. Sorry.
Well, it's just a case of Instapundit, Glenn Reynolds being proven right all over again. It's like, he basically says journalists are nothing but Democrats with bylines.
Right.
And when you read, and I didn't put it up, I just read the list, and I went, these are all major players. Anybody who follows news with any import should instantly recognize all of these names. And you go, what are they buying? Or as we saw with George Stephanopoulos, are these just ties to show their fealty?
In the case of Snuffleupagus, probably.
Snuffle octopus.
Yeah. But people like Greta, you seriously wonder. But I've always considered Greta to be a slightly nicer version of Geraldo. I.e., she's a showboat lawyer with leftist leanings.
Bill Clinton is so dreamy.
Mama's got this look of utter disgust.
You want lawyers with teeth and beauty. You're talking Kirsten Powers and Megyn Kelly, and who's the dark-haired one that's on occasionally? I think she's slightly more Democrat-leaning, but very puts up very good arguments.
I don't know. The one thing that I have to say in defense of Kirsten Powers is that this week in her book that just came out really lays it into the left.
And they don't like it.
Oh, no. She has turned into a pariah, sort of almost like Ron Fournier of National Journal, who, he's turning out to be one of those really liberal Democrats, liberal in the conservative, old-style classic liberal, defending free speech. And, she's been railing against the mob and the mobocracy that we see in the Internet, that if somebody does anything wrong, like my favorite example of the former CEO of Mozilla.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden I just forgot his name.
Brendan
Eich.
Yeah.
Just because he had given a $1,000 contribution to the Prop 8 folks 8 years before assuming the CEO-ship, and they ran him out of a job. And as far as I know right now, he's still unemployed almost a year later.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's a guy who probably will never work again.
Well, not in California. I bet if he went to Texas, there'd be high-tech companies that'd hire him.
I don't know. Austin, Texas tends to be very liberal as well, and a lot of the high-tech companies that have scammed it out of California have settled in Austin, unfortunately.
Right, but just because Austin is the center of government and is somewhat liberal, the rest of Texas is
no.
It
is quite liberal. It's not quite as liberal as, say, Berkeley, California, obviously, but
or Concord, New Hampshire.
Yeah, in contrast to most other places in Texas, it is extremely liberal.
Mm-hmm. That's why. That's exactly why I said. So, Mama was being quiet. Where I said, going to live in Texas, good idea. Going to live in Austin, not a good idea.
Yeah. Quick interruption to remind you that we are streaming live on Spreaker and Ustream, and of course at GrokTALK.com. And make sure you check us out on Twitter and Facebook. Search for GrokTALK. We're also, I think I write it down on here. Yes, I did. You can listen to this in past programs on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And, of course, always GrokTALK.com. Go search it, GrokTALK. You'll find all kinds of stuff to listen to and all kinds of guests.
Indeed.
All right, so we've got TPP. We've got the Stefan Octopus.
I like that.
Yeah, Stefan Octopus. Yeah, and so how many tentacles does it have, Skip? Or Steve?
Gosh. It is literally a Pelosi. You got to buy it so you can see what's in it kind of deal. And was it Charity Navigator's now in a tiff with the Clintons because Charity Navigator is one of the premier charity evaluators to see, gosh, do they actually do with the money what they say they're going to do? And then they found that, of the $88 million, I think they gave $6 to $8 million actually to charity. The rest of it turned into travel expenses and meetings and yada 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 for the benefit of the Clintons. It's like this is not a charity in the regular way, and now the Clintons are all mad. What do you mean you're writing about that stuff? And this is what happens when politicos run up against people who really don't care what they say, what they do. They just report, sort of like us in the NHGOP. We don't much mind what they say about us because we're just using their own words and actions right off the bat. They get mad at that. And I think Charity Navigator is showing what the Clintons have done with their money and what they've said and gone, this is not adding up.
No, and nearly all the money collected by the Clinton Foundation goes to their own administrative costs, which are said to be
huge.
Not only is it nearly all the money, that is said to be how they do their good works. In other words, their visits to places, their rounding up of people. So they're not necessarily directly spending on the poor so much as spending on getting themselves to grandstand in front of the poor.
And the Stefan
so it's monarchy.
Octopus.
It's monarchy.
Yeah. Well,
we waved. They were bettered by the experience.
Yeah. Well, the problem, Steve, is that when you see all these journalists giving all their money in donations, it's like with George Stephanopoulos, you saw how that was returned, where he interviewed the guy with who did the book Clinton Cash, and how abrasive and how antagonistic he was to somebody, who went after his former boss. It's like, what is ABC thinking with this guy in charge? And as we said in the pre-show, what the heck is the RNC thinking of even thinking of having him, or having thought to have him as a moderator in one of the debates that's supposed to happen in the near future? It's just, yes, the party of stupid.
All right. Cool. We're going to call Jorge Mesa Tejada. He's up next. Skip's going to grab the phone. We're going to take a quick break, and you stay with us, and we will be right back.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
We are GrokTALK, coming to you almost every Saturday morning, 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time. Oh, hang on. Better? Okay. You can listen to us, not just this program, but all our past, previous programs on wonderful resources like iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. We're, of course, on GraniteRock.com, YouTube, Ustream. No excuse. Yes, I'm wasting time while Skip gets our guest on the phone. He's still getting the guest on the phone. Coming up later, Jazz Shaw, David Bozell, and Max Abramson will be joining us momentarily to talk about a special election. I'm just not sure what the deal is here. Huh? Oh, his smartphone. Okay, that's fine. Not a problem. They like landlines.
First version of Microsoft Word from Bill Gates. They thought it knew better than we did.
All right, we're still killing time. All right, so Max will be in to talk about Rio Tilton running against Elaine Andrews Ahern in a Seacoast special election coming up. We'll get all those details. David Bozell will be here to talk about the need to nominate a conservative for president. Jazz Shaw is going to join us from Hot Air to talk about everything political. And we would like to welcome Jorge Mesa Tejada to the program. Jorge, good morning. You there? Jorge?
Hey, Jorge, you got to turn off your computer system volume.
Jeez, we had this down.
Try it again.
Dun, dun, dun.
We are having technical
Dun, dun,
difficulties.
dun, dun, dun. All right, let me...
All right, I'm going to try again.
Always technical difficulties. All right, I'll do that. Well, I'll turn that off. Okay. So anyway, while we wait to get Jorge back, we're going to be talking about, hopefully, if we manage to get this little glitch on his end taken care of, we will be talking about the effect of union teachers and salaries and benefits on school budgets, local school budgets. It's a huge problem. We've mentioned it a few times recently. I wrote a piece about it in Merrimack that went up at watchdog.org. Very well viewed and liked about the massive budget train, I guess that's a good word, to quote unquote educate K through 12 students at a rough estimate of $18,500 per student per year, which is a lot.
It is, and it's by no means the highest price.
It's not even close to the highest in New Hampshire, certainly.
Yeah, because I'm hearing that the costs for per student in a lot of areas are approaching or exceeding $25,000, and a couple of expensive Democrat-run urban areas may well be close to $30,000. When we arrived in this country, school budgets were about $3,000 to $5,000 per pupil. And the education, by and large, wasn't bad, and it was already a union problem.
Stay there.
Okay.
Hey! Jorge!
Morning,
Good morning.
Sorry about the technology glitch.
Oh, that's okay. It's a new experience for us to have it be on your end, because usually it's us. So that's fine. So good morning.
Good morning. I have a smartphone that's smarter than me, so that's the problem.
It's a smart-ass phone. That's the problem.
There you go.
Okay, so...
Okay, let's make up for the lost time.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, the subject that I had to talk to you about is how it is the high cost of labor in school districts is not the union contracts, but it is the irresponsible school boards. And here is my thesis. Let me give you some background first. Contrary to the school board claims, teacher contracts are not for the children. Keith Tiger, the former president of the Michigan NEA, the most rabid local in the nation, said a few years ago, "I'll represent children when they pay dues." Now, let's go to what is a union contract. It's simply a menu, a list of salary and salary-related benefits that apply to all the members of the local. But those cost items only become effective and mandatory when the school board applies them to individual employees. So why are school budgets so high? Well, two reasons. The school board negotiated and approved the inflated contracts, and the board blindly applied the benefits to all existing union members without quantifying the cost impact. Then the board claims it is powerless to control this runaway train. That is the crux of the problem, guys. It is okay, not advisable, to agree to exorbitant union contract terms. But it is not okay to use the contract as an excuse to tax constituents to oblivion. Let me give you an example. It is the same thing as going to McDonald's and ordering everything in the menu and then complaining about the high bill and blaming it on the menu. Shouldn't you first check how much money you do spend before ordering? So the same thing is true of a school district. The contracts and numbers of teachers is controlled by the board. The contracts do not control the board. Thus, I maintain that it is the responsible school boards that are totally responsible for the high cost of labor because they refuse to adjust the number of employees to a reasonable amount to offset the generous salaries demanded by the contract, which the board negotiated in the first place. That's my thesis, guys.
So interestingly, we've been doing this for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 months now, and it occurs to me that there is a very consistent theme here, and that is that school boards are basically responsible for a lot of the things that we've talked about, the wild, running, loose, free-range superintendents, the contracts, and how do we educate the people? Because they're going to elect school board members, and those are the people who are going to allow these things to happen. And we really need to do something about this. Precisely.
The problem is that when people run for a school board, they do it with best of intentions. Some because the union puts them up to them because they have an agenda or something. But in general, they are well-intentioned people. Then they hit the reality when they have the first meeting and the superintendent tells them, you follow my direction. And then the New Hampshire School Boards Association reinforces that. So the board becomes a rubber stamp rather than the board of directors, which is mandated by law. And they fail to discharge their lawful duties. How do you change that? That takes a certain amount of gumption and integrity on the part of those who run for boards.
Well, not only that, Jorge, and thanks for coming on, but it also seems to be, at least in my experience, that while the elections here in New Hampshire are nonpartisan, what I've seen in my town is that often it is the government workers and their supporters against everybody else. And unfortunately, everybody else doesn't always show up depending on the town because, say in my town, they can afford the higher taxes. And I know that out of the municipal and school board costs in the town, the school boards or the school district is 2/3 of the entire bite out of the wallet. And yet, having run a couple of times now and seeing as soon as I start running, the government employees band together and decide to make sure I don't get back in. And we've been able to prove that by going through the ballots and going through the voter lists and the results. It's very hard to get the normal people to come out and vote their own self-interest, whereas the schoolies or the town employees are definitely going to get them and their supporters out to vote their interests.
Well, that is true everywhere, but what they vote is whatever the board puts out there on that ballot. So that does not obviate my statement that the whatever is put on paper and it is being put forth for the voters to approve still is the product of the board.
Right,
which
but
it isn't. It's really the superintendent.
Well, yeah, but I'm just kind of pointing out that the boards get stacked.
Oh, it's definitely no question about that. We cannot cure all the ills, but the question is how come they don't see that while enrollment is going down, labor costs keep going up, and we don't see any reduction in personnel? Well, what can you say? I mean, the data does not lie. And when you confront these people, they just look up in the air, and then the assistant superintendent or superintendent comes to the rescue and say, they give you all the platitudes that you are used to hearing. But the bottom line is that the board does not exercise its lawful duty and say, okay, this is why we are doing it.
How many classes do you need to run? How many kids are in each class? And what auxiliary activities or indeed auxiliary staff do you have that maybe you don't need to prepare and deliver lessons, which is, after all, the only function of the school?
I was going to say the administrative costs, the number of administrative personnel, also something that superintendents tend to swell if they have the opportunity, has an additional burden, in many cases a significant burden on school budgets, doesn't it?
Yeah, friends and relatives.
And usually they are not part of a union, but their salaries are based on the union scale. And it's a circular firing squad. The superintendent is part of the negotiating team, and so is the assistant superintendent sometimes. So they negotiate a contract. And then when the SAU salary situation comes up, or the principal salaries come up for discussion, they say, well, we have to do it so much higher than the highest paid teacher based on the union contract. So they negotiate the schedules, and they use that as a basis to argue for their salaries.
Yeah, and it is hard because what you hear, and I'll never forget this at one of the town meetings, or town deliberative sessions actually, was I overheard two teachers. One of them turned out to be the head of the local school union. Well, the enrollment may be down, but the needs are greater in trying to talk about the school budget. So until a number of people start asking the question, what's your direct versus indirect labor cost ratio, they're not going to cut it until you catch them red-handed. Unfortunately, for a lot of school boards, they are starting to face the declining enrollment, and they have to start cutting because the normal person is starting to get the idea of exactly your question. Why do the costs keep going up even as the enrollments are going down 10, 15, 20, 25%? People are starting to say, wait a minute here.
Hey, Jorge, we just ran out of segment.
Oh.
Okay, nice talking to you guys. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. You too. We'll talk to you next month.
Okay, take care.
All right. Have a good day. Bye. Okay. Oops, I cut off his goodbye. This is GrokTALK. I'm Steve McDonald here with Mike Rogers. Marma Rogers is here supervising Skip Murphy, and we will be right back. Stay tuned. We're expecting Max Abramson any minute.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
"There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change."
Jeanne Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to GrokTALK.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALk.
Remember, you heard the term Stephanoctopus here first. Cutting edge. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Please look for Granite Grok. Follow us, and you can get wisdom like this at the drop of a dime. You never know when it's going to happen. Could be any second now. We're waiting for Max. I got to check to see if maybe I'm supposed to call him, and I didn't know that. But thanks to Jorge for coming in. David Bozell at 10 o'clock. Jazz Shaw at 10:30. In the meantime, we will do what we do, which is fill.
Well, frankly, if he's outside trying to find a parking space, I can understand why he may be all over the place trying to find such.
It is not a good situation.
My first thought, seeing that the main street of Concord is all half torn up.
Sidewalks,
the whole bit. It's like, how many of the stores, ostensibly for which this whole thing is being done, this whole renovation of Concord, how many of them are still going to be alive by the time this thing's done?
Not too many, because nobody's walking up and down that street. Now, we come in here every week, Saturday morning, and afterwards we go out and we walked down 2 blocks or whatever it is to go get hot dogs.
Used to, because
they had to move the cart because there was no business. So normally there is a very busy hustle-bustle going on in this particular stretch of Main Street that we walk down. There is nobody here.
Hasn't been for a couple of weeks.
Right, and it's going to be that way all summer, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Right, and in the process, they're making the road narrower and the parking more difficult. And going to make it more pedestrian friendly. Well, that's great as long as it's easy to cruise along a parallel street and park, but that's not actually the case most of the way around here. And I looked at what they were constructing, and if it's the way I think it is, there'll be less lanes of traffic, and it'll be more difficult getting in and out of the parking slots. Translated, anytime anybody has to get in or out of a parking slot, there won't be a second lane for people to get by. The entire street will jam up. And I can tell you from experience, there are shopping areas I never go to because I can't stand the stop-go traffic. I simply won't go there. And so, they don't get my business, and there's probably a lot of other people's business they don't get.
You have to wonder if the people on the other side of the street who aren't having their road torn up yet lobbied. Tear up that side first.
Well, I don't know.
I doubt it, because if both sides get torn up, they all lose in the end.
Yeah, I don't know if they are. I don't know what the whole plan is, but I assume it's to tear up everything and wreck it for weeks on end.
Well, I think there are those that have been behind this plan, and coming from the Lakes region, I have no skin in this game except for Saturday mornings. I know that if I had to come down here for something, I wouldn't. I can go to the malls and I can get what I want, or I can go online. I don't need to. I've got plenty of restaurants up my way. I don't have to come down here just for a restaurant. But it seems like some of the big building owners, let's see, what name is it that comes to mind again that was behind this? Oh, yeah, Steve Dupree.
Really?
He's a big property owner here in Concord along Main Street. Several. I noticed that the streets aren't torn up in front of his properties, especially his hotels. But, eventually it will have an effect, but probably less of an effect percentage-wise.
So he's pro-choice. He chose to abort these businesses rather than his own.
Nicely put. Yes, we speak of New Hampshire GOP committee man Steve Dupree, who was caught red-handed giving money to Planned Parenthood Action Fund.
Pink-handed? I don't know if that's the appropriate phrase.
Bloody red?
Ooh, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, this is the PAC of Planned Planned Parenthood, the abortion mill, that's got their scalpels ready for Kelly Ayotte and suction tubes to get rid of her. And so here's the NHGOP committee man giving them money to operate their machinery. And then he says, well, I didn't know. Yeah, you've been a political operative for 40 years. So anyways, back to here. I think that...
Well, no, actually, one of the things that I said last week or the week before was the guy who invited him to the event, longtime friend apparently, he knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So you're telling me he didn't tell him what was going on? Longtime friend, a pro-abortion, longtime friend.
Yeah.
Funding, donations, they're connected. Didn't know, didn't say.
Yeah.
Really?
And of course, the editorial in yesterday's Concord Monitor was the Republicans ought to be more liking Planned Parenthood. They ought to be all more like Steve Dupree in this manner.
My current favourite quote from Ronald Reagan, I notice that all people in favour of abortion have already been born.
Yeah. Yes.
That is a good one.
Or that their parents made a better choice than they're proposing.
Yeah. But, I feel sorry for the little shopkeepers who, the small business, small entrepreneurs. But it seems like it's all the politicos and the big-time folks who wish to have everything redone. And I agree with you, Mike. If it's not, they seem to, the planners behind this seem to have the idea, if we make it walkable, they will come. Yeah. No, if you make it more convenient, they will come. But these planners all seem to have this idea of going back to the 1920s, the way that city centers used to be. And everybody lived there, and everybody had to walk. You had to walk to the grocery store every single day. You had to go to this every day, that every day, because you lived in such a small apartment without refrigeration and everything else. It's
but isn't this what Agenda 21's about, trying to get everyone back into the town
rack 'em,
centres?
stack 'em, and pack 'em.
Yeah.
You betcha.
You get them into the town centres, then make it impossible for them to do anything with their cars, so they have to walk around.
Well, at any point in the future, we should expect a trolley or a train to be going down the middle of Main Street carrying people up and down. That's probably somewhere in the vision.
Yeah.
Because you won't be able to park.
You have to park at either end and then use the public conveyances to get in and out, which will pretty much be the end of Main Street in Concord, because aside from the people who actually live here, who are all crunchy and are like, oh, I gotta ride a little train at store, nobody else is going to come here.
They've done this in
and maybe
Nashua,
that's the point.
and they have ruined business in Nashua. They've tried to beautify the main street, much less parking. People won't come. And the shops are all dying. And
because
really
people
nice
used to park in front of the shop for 15 to 30 minutes, do what they needed to do, and move on again. They don't want to park 15 minutes walk away to come to the shop, so they don't come. And they just don't get that. And same thing here. If you're looking along these storefronts, what was here were, I wouldn't call them low-end businesses, but businesses that clearly depended on a relatively reasonable rent in order to be able to function, and maybe not making huge profits, but worked on walk-by traffic. We're now seeing some of those businesses replaced by very shiny, glossy, liberal-looking business at Vapor Shop, for God's sakes. I'm sorry. That maybe rely on a smaller number of high-paying pedestrian customers, but I guarantee you the drive-in, drive-out customer's gone.
Well, I think I'm typical of most male shoppers. Shopping for me is an activity with a point to it. There's something I have in mind. I know where I want to go get it. I go in, I get it, I leave. Unfortunately, most of these planners seem to want to make every single little podunk town in the U.S. And let's face it, in the grand scheme of things, Concord is a podunk little town, having traveled to many of them all over the country. It's like, if you think you can make yourself like downtown Boston with 4 blocks, you're sadly disturbed. And people aren't going to come here on a regular basis unless you're kind of the crunchy kind with a liberal Vapor Shop or something like that, the hoity-toity restaurant down the street or so. People are not going to come here just to while away the hours or the day just because you've made it look nice.
No, I mean, aside from anything else, if you make it an all pedestrian area to try and make it a shopping experience instead of just let me come and get it and go, you've turned it into a shopping mall, but without the air conditioning and the protection from the elements.
Which is the whole reason why malls grew up in the first place. Well, not only that, but who wants to walk for several blocks carrying lots of packages and bags? That ain't happening.
No.
At least at a mall, I can grab a carriage.
Right.
Hey, is Concord, you going to put out a whole bunch of grocery carts for us? I doubt it.
They might. Maybe they'll have a rent-a-bike program, or
Well, here's the deal. You talked about the trains earlier, and I've been blogging about the choo-choo train fanatics here in New Hampshire. Well, guys, the automated cars are coming along. That is going to be such a huge disruption to this whole idea of the choo-choo trains that cost way more capital-wise. They are very inflexible. You have to adapt to their schedule. Instead of hailing an Uber driverless car that drives right up to your doorstep, takes you where you want to go, waltzes off, and then you can summon it back when you're ready, and then it takes you home. And you don't need a bus, you don't need a train, you don't need light rail. You may not even need rail at all. Let it do what it's really, really good at, which is freight. We have the best freight rail system in the world here. We also have much better highway systems, even though we talk about lots of potholes and stuff like that. That's a function of the local governments and mismanaging the money. And we have a whole lot better set of airports than anywhere else in the world. Why should we go back to 18th century technology?
And let me mention something since you brought it up, the freight railroads. Something I didn't know. I read this article yesterday over at David Stockman's Contra Corner. Amtrak, a national hazard at any speed.
Yeah.
And the reason it's so is we've had more than 40 years, nearly 50 years of subsidies going back to Nixon and Carter, and nobody's ever been able to completely kill them off. Whenever Congress tries to cut the budget, Amtrak takes away from their infrastructure, their capital budget, in order to keep paying their bloated operating costs, read union money, to keep the damn thing running. And so the infrastructure and the rolling stock decays. But that's not the only thing. Not only do we subsidize Amtrak, the freight railroads, who own most of the track that Amtrak runs over, which is why the track in Lower Connecticut is such a goddamn mess, because it's owned by CSX, not Amtrak, is because they are forced to lease the use of those rails to Amtrak at below market rates. Read subsidize, read more robbery, read everybody paying more money for freight transport. In other words, the government's robbing us with the other hand too.
Yeah. Now, I read a blog on a regular basis called The Anti-Planner. He's, I can't remember his name, unfortunately. We actually had him on Meet the New Press, our old radio show. He's a very well-regarded person over at Cato, where he actually works, and does this kind of study. And he always sweeps up all of the latest rail information as far as subsidies and how much they cost per mile, all the minutia that can be related to the finances. It's like, look at the Downeaster, one of the better run railroads, which I put scare quotes around better run. We still subsidize everybody there for $50 a ticket, round trip in and out of Boston. Now, is this the way the business is going to run? So you see the indentured servitude of the many to pay for the very few well-off to ride that thing, and the Excella and the high-speed rails, out, here in the Northeast Corridor. Which, if any place passenger rail is going to work, it's going to be done here in the Northeast, just because of density. And they're at $60 a ticket.
And Boston too. There is no reason to be involved in. If you're going from city center to city center like a businessman is, you do not want to go to the airport, go through the security, go through the hassle, come back, try and find a cab or an Uber if they're permitted in that city, and get yourself back to your destination when I can disappear onto a train up here, get off the train in New York, and get a short cab or Uber ride to my destination.
Yeah, and this is the problem that they're having out in California with the high-speed rail, where they're saying, well, and I put that up from Antiplanner, or I was going to anyways. It's the same kind of deal. They're saying that they have to price it below the cost of the airlines for a 4.5-hour trip between these two major hubs, San Francisco and L.A. Well, 4.5 hours is a good amount of traffic for an airline. And there's no way with the big capital cost that the high-speed rail is ever going to break even. You know, as a lot of people are starting to say, why are we spending this money for high-speed rail? We ought to be putting this into our water infrastructure. Oh, now you get the environmentalists, which are part of the reason why the cost for rail is so high in the first place, because they're going to environmentally study this thing to death.
Back. We're going to take a quick break. Be right back. Stay tuned.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
We're going to talk about Max's parking blues in a second, because he's here. But before we do that, I wanted to read this real quick. See, I'm talking. That's why I didn't turn your microphone on yet, because you were going to interrupt me. The Molly Hemingway over at The Federalist has a great article about the left freaking out after the Amtrak cash, and she writes, The theodicy of federal government requires an explanation that defends the goodness of government control or subsidies into the given sphere. So just as some religious groups might blame a weather event on insufficient fealty to the relevant god, some progressives blame, before the National Transportation Safety Board has even shown up on site to investigate the cause of a crash, insufficient fealty, sacrifice, and offerings to the relevant god or federal government. Yes, it's annoying how some progressives politicize everything, but it's understood as a sort of primitive religious reaction to confusion about holy government's many failures. It at least helps explain why they do it. Let's see what headset Max is on. I don't know. I'll try this one.
How about this one?
Oh, awesome.
Nailed it right on the first time.
All right, so we got about 14 minutes, and then we have a guest, and then we have some more time. So, welcome.
Sorry I'm late.
Hi there.
It came as fast as I could, but my steering wheel started shaking like crazy, and I thought there must be something wrong. So I pulled over the side of the road. I couldn't find any rocks in the tires. There weren't any loose lug nuts. I was looking all over the car. So I finally said, I'm going to have to take this to a mechanic. So I jumped back in the car and had to merge with freeway traffic, which is doing 70. This is on Route 101. And it's not just any car. It's an Acura RSX. So I merged with traffic in about 6 seconds. So I just revved it up to 8,000 RPM, took it all the way through the gears, and I was up to 70 immediately. And just all of a sudden it smoothed out. I think it was something with the engine or maybe the way the clutch was engaged. Who knows? We'll find out when I get it looked at. But so,
yeah.
We have 3 special elections, past, present, and future. Dennis Green was just elected. Republican, and a very good Republican and a friend of Ken Weiler. And he wasn't just elected; he was elected by about 61% to 38%. So he had a 23% margin. Now that doesn't sound like big news because Hampstead and Kingston are already a Republican-leaning district. But remember, Mitt Romney only beat Obama by 17% of the vote. So the fact that here we are in a special election, And we not only won, but we won with a significantly larger margin there. Now, Dennis Green did campaign very hard, but the next special election coming up is Yvonne Dean Bailey running against Maureen Mann.
And
a topic of much discussion.
And the Liberals are scared. They're putting out liars and lying liars with lying emails.
So before I move on to the Yvonne case, I was standing holding a sign at the polls in Kingston, which is not in my district, but it used to be right next to my legislative district before they redistricted my district. And Ken Weiler was there. We had a couple of other former state reps come in. We had a lot of volunteers come in. And Croteau had a lot of Democrats standing over by the street. You know, as cars are driving by, you can't really see the signs. We're standing right next to the polling place. We're standing right where people come in. So we picked out good locations at both polling places. And once again, as the Democrats came by, they wouldn't even look at us, let alone say hi to us. There are more and more of these Democrats moving in from other states trying to turn New Hampshire into a Democratic state and push their big government policies and turn us into another Massachusetts. But they won't even look at us. They won't talk to us. They won't wave. We smile. They won't even make eye contact. So you can tell why they're there at the polls. It's just to push their candidates.
I've said that at the polls in Hollis. You can tell the Democrats because they won't respond. They don't make eye contact. Won't respond to a hello or anything.
They've cut themselves off from society. They won't listen to smaller government, decentralized government. They won't hear about free market solutions. They don't want to hear the Republican line. They don't want to hear about our ideas. They just want to limit themselves to the whole safe, progressive, repeat the same message over and over again. And they don't want to question anything.
Well, they're making their stereotype known, where we often say, you know, liberals are just wrong or deluded. They think we are evil. Therefore, all of our ideas are evil as well. And as Steve was mentioning about upon the altar of God, the government type of deal, how dare you speak heresy? That makes you a subhuman, so they don't want to talk to you. And there may be some people who are saying, Skip, you're being very pejorative. Well, unfortunately, that's the way it is. Really bad.
Okay, go ahead.
So the next special election is coming up this Tuesday. Yvonne Dean Bailey is a 19-year-old. She's running for state representative for the first time in her life. She's a college student who was widely criticized and ridiculed and mocked as not going along with the liberal line at her college. Now she's running for state representative. And she was kind of holding the torch for liberty and conservative values at her college. And now she's running for state representative. I think she's a very good candidate. Ironically, she came out and volunteered to help with the Dennis Green campaign and was doing poll watching and that kind of thing, going to the different polling places. And she's very bright. She's a very intelligent young lady, and I think she'll make a terrific state representative. Now, there was recently a scandal. Carl Gibson, who was a volunteer who was, quote-unquote, fired or let go from the campaign before all of this happened because he was arguing with Maureen Mann for...
he wanted to go more left.
To the left.
Which made me laugh out loud.
How do you go more left than Maureen Mann?
That's my problem. I'm like, what's to the left of Maureen Mann? The answer? Nothing.
Not even Obama?
Well, they're from the same cloth. I mean, they're not... She's been working that. They've been trying to portray her as a moderate. It's like they tried to portray Maggie Hassan as a moderate. Yeah, see?
It's amazing.
Marmar's laughing. And it's funny because that's true. It's just not possible. But not everybody knows that.
Now, Maureen Mann's very nice. She's easy to get along with. Everyone works well with her personally, but she is very far to the left, and she votes pretty much straight Democrat Party line. Now, the controversy was that even though it was supposedly he was removed from his position, they're still talking and communicating and coordinating on Twitter and Facebook, and they're still friends on Facebook. And he sent out an email, didn't even sign her name correctly, used a Microsoft Word document, I guess, to fake that. And in the hidden signature within the file, it actually has his signature, his name, Carl Gibson, is on that. He sent this fake email out with this attachment, misspelling her name, and told everyone that Yvonne had dropped out of the race right before the election, October surprise, except, what is it, May? So now this could potentially cost Marine Man the election because it's viewed as coming from her campaign. Carl Gibson, by the way, was arrested. He was arrested at an Occupy movement, and during that he's wearing one of these, T-shirts with the international sign for no, do not do this. And on that there's a pair of scissors, and I'm wondering what the meaning of that is. But I think it's odd that you have these activists. He was arrested in New York City, by the way. He's not from New Hampshire, so he's come up. He's one of these.
He's from Madison, Wisconsin.
He's one of these commie state project people who has come to New Hampshire. His purpose is to get really active for Democratic campaigns, to get Democrats in and swing New Hampshire to become a Democratic state.
Skip, what was it I wrote?
You wrote quite a bit.
About a New Hampshire House election. Having a hired Twitter guy, this guy in particular. What the heck is that?
Yeah, who does that
Some
in New
people
Hampshire
don't
House
spend
races?
a dime to run for the New Hampshire House. Maureen Mann and the New Hampshire Democrat Party are piling money into this race. And they're picking up out-of-state operatives to do social media for a special election in a New Hampshire House race. How desperate must they be?
No, it's not so much desperation. It's more of a case of intent. Because they're trying to get set up for the decennial, the end of the decade races. And, the head honcho there, Ray Buckley, has already said, and then out of fairness, we will make changes, meaning if they take the House, and they are going to redistrict again, and trust me, they will do it with a vengeance.
Yeah, and they won't fight over it. They'll have a plan handed to them, and they will do it, and it'll give them an advantage.
Yeah. I see all these Democrats surrounding me, and they're sitting there when it's time to vote, and they have this thick white packet there, and it tells them how to vote on every single issue. Every Wednesday when we have a whole bunch of votes on the floor, Democrats are sitting there, they have a white packet, and they have to vote that way 100% of the time. So they're not voting with their district. They're just voting straight Ray Buckley agenda.
Do Jasper and Flanagan carry those packets too?
They have the exact same white packet that they hand out to their own Jaspercrats and those committee chairs and vice chairs. And if you look at their two white packets, they look almost exactly the same. When you go through the voting records, on almost every single issue, they're the same. So Jasper is telling.
Can we get some proof of that, or are you willing to write that as a story? Because that's fabulous. And by the way, you mentioned what the guy was wearing on his T-shirt. Ed Nail explains it for us. A nationwide is a co-founder.
You're going to have to wait. We don't have time. Can you fit it into 5 seconds?
Yes.
Go.
A founder of U.S. Uncut, a nationwide creative direct action movement.
All right.
Uncut.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned with David Bozell.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
We are struggling. Rising healthcare costs are part of the problem. Senator Jeanne Shaheen helped create this mess we're in. As a state senator, her bill chased 21 insurers out of our state. It reduced our choices, raised prices for New Hampshire families, and when Jeanne Shaheen supported Obamacare, it limited access to 10 of our 26 hospitals, reducing our choices again. Tell Jeanne Shaheen she's made healthcare worse. Few things are as important as finding the right doctor. And under Obamacare, that's harder than ever. Over a third of our hospitals no longer available. Our doctors no longer covered. Fewer choices, longer drives. No state has been harder hit than us. And even after watching it impact New Hampshire, Congresswoman Ann Custer still supports it. Call Ann Custer. Tell her Obamacare isn't working for New Hampshire.
Feel the power.
Oh, I can feel it.
Our moment of triumph approaches. It's
GrokTALk.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALk.
Welcome back to GrokTALK, where open mics during the break are not common, but do happen from time to time.
Yes,
right.
Steve.
Yes, they do. Hey, don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Listen on Ustream, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, and TuneIn. Because you want to hear what this guy has to say. We have David Bozell back from For America. David, welcome.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Did someone get caught on a hot mic?
Yeah, I don't know what we said. I can't wait to listen. It'll be great. It'll be great. You know, we never say anything really bad, so it's not like it's a big deal, but
Not really bad, anyway.
No, we're actually very well-behaved conservatives and libertarians here. Ha! Yeah, we are. Well, when it comes to being nice, liberals, if you leave them an open mic, they say all kinds of nasty things. But usually, when we're talking, we're not being mean to anybody. We're just talking issues, right?
Right. We're just right.
We
get annoyed.
We make fun of people.
That's right. We do,
including the NHGOP.
All right. So, speaking of Republicans, we have this primary thing going on.
Yeah.
And we have a huge buffet of choices, and it's really pretty important that we make good decisions about these guys and girls, right?
Yep. Well, let's talk about the presumed front runner, Mr. Bush, for 1 second. We did a video. For America did a video, our second one, about Mr. Bush, centered around. We released it this week. Centered around an appearance that he made in 2013, where he gave Hillary Clinton a Lifetime Achievement Award for her public service, quote unquote. And a year to the day, it was almost a year to the date of the anniversary of Benghazi, if you can believe that. Now let's just we won't rehash the alphabet soup of scandals that Hillary and her husband have been involved in while in public service. It's the event, the award itself, as benign as it may have seemed at the time, is going to be a problem for Mr. Bush. Let's spin it forward. Let's say he wins the GOP nomination. Every candidate that he defeats along the way, the entire apparatus of the Republican Party, every conservative commentator and talking head is going to be asked to, in other words, take the low road against Hillary Clinton and her public service record, while Jeb Bush takes the high road, while all the aforementioned are going to be asked to defend their candidate, Jeb Bush. It becomes an intellectually dishonest proposition to go after Hillary Clinton's record for her public service, while the candidate, the GOP nominee, presumably Jeb Bush in this scenario, is granting her Lifetime Achievement Awards for exactly that same public service record. It becomes an intellectually dishonest problem for everybody involved, not just him.
So, in other words, we're locked in from the beginning, if we're not careful, with a candidate who cannot attack his probable opponent, which is even worse than we had with Romney, where Romney at least hadn't ever said anything particularly nice about Obama.
Exactly correct. And if we think that Hillary Clinton won't use footage of the event against him, we're fooling ourselves. Of course she will. That's the Clintons' MO. And so it's an attack ad. It's an ad that writes itself for Hillary Clinton. I mean, if anything, the event basically was Jeb Bush praising and touting Hillary Clinton's presidential credentials. So it's going to be a huge problem for him. It's why we do not think that he is electable at all. And the sooner he kind of exits stage left, the better for the GOP nomination process.
Hey, Dave, this is Skip. Don't you think, though, we're getting into that area where the electorate just doesn't care anymore? We who are in the inside baseball world, like yourself, political bloggers like us, we get this stuff. The political operatives all get this stuff, but half of them don't care because they want to see him win. The electorate, they don't make the connection because they're not paying attention.
Well, I agree with you to a point. That kind of presupposes that they would vote for Jeb Bush just based on his winning personality, which I don't know if he has that either. I mean, he kind of has that kind of. I'm kind of borderline getting personal here, but I don't mean to. But he kind of has that kind of Bush hand kind of reflex whenever he speaks, and it's just the optics of a Jeb Bush are just problematic. He's just not a very appealing guy on camera. Everything, the Iraq stuff, all this week, every time he goes and makes a speech from now until the end of 2016 cycle, he's going to be reminded about his brother and his brother's record, and he's going to be asked about his brother and his brother's record, for better or for worse.
You think he should?
Reasonable people, real quick. Reasonable people can disagree as to whether or not the Iraq War was justified or a grand misadventure. But that's just not what the 2016 cycle ought to be about. And the press and Hillary Clinton will try to make it that. And if Jeb Bush is there, it will be that. And conservatives will suffer. Conservatism will suffer because of it.
Maybe we could get him to embrace the Hillary Clinton plan, which is to show up at small managed events.
Yeah.
Doing that. He's already close to doing that anyway, because he prefers sycophant house parties to public forums anyway. The other thing I was going to say is he's already showing a tendency for Bushisms, where he misspeaks in strange ways. Not quite as interesting as George W. yet, but I think we're going to find plenty of examples as time goes by.
They're piling up. I mean, the videos, the montage clips of Jeb Bush kind of stepping on himself are already piling up on the trail. And this is one of his pitfalls. Was he was last in elected office before essentially social media was ever invented. Facebook, Twitter, all the rest of it. Does he have enough money to buy a team that knows how to navigate these things? Yeah, he does. But he himself, as a candidate, he himself has to be calling the shots and has to have a voice on these platforms, and he just has not found it yet at all. And if you're not going to be on these platforms regularly and not going to use them to your advantage, you just might as well not show up. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, compare and contrast, for example, Ted Cruz, who has been an expert on social media from the beginning and regularly lampoons the left.
Exactly. And he understands the peer-to-peer endorsement model that only social media provides. In other words, you may not trust Ted Cruz and you may not agree with Ted Cruz, but you trust your friends, you trust your family. That's just human nature. And that's what social media is all about. So he may have someone in his vortex that believes in him, and social media provides people, grassroots Americans, an opportunity to convince their friends and family, because without having to rely on Ted Cruz to do it. So that's the beauty of it. It's why he won the senator's race in Texas.
Do you? It seems like a pretty target-rich environment of Jeb Bush-like people at the top. Who else do we need to keep an eye on? Do you think? I mean, I have my own list, but
that could be problematic.
Yes.
Well, I just don't think Lindsey Graham has a shot. Now, it's the worst kept secret in town that the only reason Lindsey Graham is running for president is because he wants to just siphon off votes from in all manners of different directions, but notably Cruz and Rand Paul, because he can't stand those guys, down in South Carolina. And he probably will, and then that'll be the end of his campaign. But so it really is the worst kept secret. He's just really in there as a pawn of the establishment. So he can be a problem. I don't know about
Dave,
Christie yet, though. Yeah,
Dave, who in their right mind, though, would ever think that the folks that would vote for Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul would ever consider Lindsey Grahamnesty?
Nationally, I would agree with you, but South Carolina, I mean, they love him down there. And even good, conservatives that we all would agree with, they respect him down there, and they've conditioned themselves to pull a lever for Lindsey Graham. He's their guy. There's a little bit of a home state advantage that he's got.
Do you think he'll siphon off more votes from Jeb Bush than he would from the conservatives?
I don't know. He'll probably siphon off the votes from all of them, just because of the home state advantage that he has. Mm-hmm. But if he ends up, knocking down Ted Cruz by a few percentage points, it's mission accomplished. If he ends up knocking down Rand Paul or Marco Rubio down a few percentage points, mission accomplished for Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, okay.
But spinning it forward, though, I think the calendar is really set up very nicely for conservatives. Once you get past Iowa, you guys up in New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, some of the January through February. In March is the first real Super Tuesday is March 1st. You got a chock full of a lot of conservative states. Texas, notably for Ted Cruz. Oklahoma, his neighbor to the north. North Carolina, Tennessee. A lot of rich conservative territory, and a good conservative candidate could rack up a lot of delegates on the first Super Tuesday and carry a lot of momentum with them.
So, who'd you find as a good conservative candidate? And bear in mind, we get some more trying to jump in there. We get the huckster, and we get Sanctorium.
Sanctorium. I mean, at this point, guys, I would have like a basketball lottery, just to split up the debate forums. Just do 4 at a time, because it is you just cannot. You're not going to have a good debate with 12, 16 people up there. It's a recipe for disaster.
Like a crowd.
It really is.
Yeah, 7 or so didn't work well last time.
No, I know exactly. I think most of the senators, putting Lindsey Graham aside, those guys are the real deal. I mean, Marco Rubio has his warts with regards to the immigration stuff, but he's the real deal. He's got an excellent story. They all have excellent stories. They all have pretty fascinating rags to riches stories, and they all have basically good conservative voting records. Aside from Lindsey Graham, frankly, even Jeb Bush has a good record. I mean, so there's no really disputing a lot of the records. We can pick around the edges, around the margins, but they're all the real deal. That's why it's going to be a fascinating race. That's why it's going to be an exciting race. It's going to be conservatism on parade. And I think that all of them, maybe not all of them, but most of them are going to keep the knives out from each other's backs. That's how close they are to one another personally. Yeah. So I think it's going to be refreshing, so long as it just doesn't get overcrowded, and we get to hear these guys and their platforms. But I'll repeat what I said to you guys a couple weeks ago. To the candidate that runs early and often and on multi-channel platforms about getting government off people's backs, the candidate can do that and articulate that well, I think will be the victor.
Dave, we're almost at the end of the segment, but a quick question. There's a movement nationally, and here in New Hampshire, there's the 603 Alliance that is trying to coalesce conservatives to almost caucus and select a given conservative so as to split the vote of all the moderates, opposite of what normally happens. Do you think that will have an effect on the race?
Well, I think if conservatives banded together around one, it would. But I think getting to the one is going to take a little bit longer than maybe people would like, because everyone's got their favorite. Everyone's got their 1 and 1A. We're having meetings all across the country ourselves, and we ask the question, who's your number 1 and who's your number 2, and how enthusiastic are you? And it's usually a conservative 1 and another conservative 1A, and very enthusiastic about both. Cruz Jindal, Cruz Rubio, Rubio Jindal, Rubio Walker, Walker Cruz. So I think it's just going to take longer for everyone to kind of coalesce around one. It'll depend on the campaign infrastructure of these candidacies. Who they surround themselves with, who's their staffs. Are they the real deal? And that's going to be critically important because a lot of these staffs are going to be working and creating policy after this is all over if they win. So I think that's going to be an important sort of measuring stick for a lot of conservatives. Who do you surround yourself with? So, but I think it probably would take a little bit longer than maybe people hope. But I just don't see Jeb Bush catching fire, even if, and I know you guys have in the open primary, even if he did well in New Hampshire, I just cannot see him doing well in Iowa. I cannot see him going down to South Carolina and doing well. Nevada, these caucus states. I mean, there's the caucus states. There's a great website. I forget the name of it, guys. And interrupt me if I'm running along. But there's a great website out there that's tracking all the straw polls that have been taking place throughout this campaign. There's been about a dozen of them in 5 different states. Jeb Bush hasn't won a single one, and I don't even think he's coming higher than 5th. So, these caucus states are going to be important. And do you have the apparatus to win? I don't think that he does.
All right, sir. If I remember correctly, we will probably have you on in another 2 weeks because I think I have another email to follow up on. So we'll see you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, guys. Take it easy.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Hi, it is host of Dread at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Welcome back. Hey, that music sounds familiar. Oh, that's how we start the show every second. Welcome back. Thanks again. Many thanks to David Bozell. We have a couple of different communications organizations sending me emails for different people, and I keep getting his name from different places. So we're going to have him back in a week or two for another subject. So,
right, and he mentioned a very important point. He mentions the importance of the caucus states and the difficulty of getting conservatives to agree on a candidate because everybody's got their number 1 and their number 2, and they're not exactly the same, and that is so. And, one of the sayings that I've made in respect to the 603 Alliance is that you cannot herd the cats. You have to lead them to make their own choice of the better brand of catnip. And that is the entire purpose of the 603 Alliance, is to present the candidates to the voters and then to hold a caucus where the voters themselves will agree that the winner of the caucus shall receive their support, and then they get in and mix it up and pick one. But that way, the winner at the end of the event is in fact one that the cats have self-selected, not been herded to, and that's how we hope to make a significant bump in the voting numbers for a better conservative. Maybe not the best conservative according to your opinion, but one that's maybe 80% of what you're looking for. And so keep listening, conservatives. We're going to make this happen.
Well, when I was emailing Jazz Schaub, I'd asked him when he was going to be coming up to New Hampshire yet, and he said, well, let me know what events you're going to have, and I'll see if I can get my boss to get me up there. And I told him off the record that in October we're going to have this caucus thing, the 603 Alliance. I don't know if media will be invited. I don't know what's going to get done. But I told him, I said, that would be the thing to go to if you were going to come up here. So let me find you first.
Likely to be at the Hopkinton Fairgrounds.
Yeah.
Which, is more or less central in the state, not too far up 89 from where it branches off. And it has capacious buildings, good parking, and so on, which is precisely why we can get a lot of people for a relatively reasonable sum. This is a relatively low-budget organization.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, that's kind of...
high class, but not a lot of money.
Yeah. So we got about 6 or 7 minutes before we have to call Jazz.
So we were talking about trains and subsidies when when we got to the end of a prior segment, and one of the things that's particularly interesting, I mentioned that that the freight railroads are forced to give away money, but as I say, over at Contra Corner, David Stockman did the numbers, and he was actually involved in Reagan's team when they were trying to shut down the subsidies to Amtrak the first time. Sounds a bit like the education department, doesn't it? And he's run the numbers, and he said basically the cost to operate Amtrak is approaching 65 cents per passenger mile in total. They never make more on average than 30 cents per passenger mile, which basically means there's never any money left over for anything, especially not for capital infrastructure. And furthermore, the costs of buses and planes are on the order of 11 to 15 cents per passenger mile. So no matter how you cut it, it's way, way cheaper, and they're profitable too. It's way, way cheaper for people to travel by plane and bus or car than it is on Amtrak. And that's why it's never going to be a good deal.
Yeah.
As I say, they rob us blind every which way.
They do. We got through the...
After
we got through the...
There we go. Sorry.
And we were talking special elections too, Max, and you were...
Oh, that's right. I was just going to say the $300 million commuter rail boondoggle that Governor Hassan wants. Boy, as soon as the applause died down, they forgot about that. We went through the budget process, and they're talking about programs for the disabled and special needs and whatnot. All of a sudden, they completely forget about that $300 million rail boondoggle. That would have blown a hole in the budget a mile wide. I mean, we would have had to have raised taxes dramatically. All the tax increases and fee increases that Governor Hassan was proposing wouldn't come close to paying for that project. Plus, you'd have a $10 million in operating costs, and most of the labor unions and union contractors building that and operating the rail system would be Massachusetts contractors and Massachusetts unions. It wouldn't be New Hampshire workers. However,
and that, by the way, is the interesting thing about the rail project. It'll be built by importing Massachusetts people into New Hampshire and paying them New Hampshire dollars, and it will operate to enable New Hampshire voters to work for Massachusetts businesses.
Except that over 90% of the mileage of that track would be in Massachusetts, so they wouldn't even be coming into New Hampshire to buy a soda or fill up their gas tank here. Almost all of the work would be done down there.
And one of the things that has to be pointed out is that why is it that New Hampshire politicians want to join up with the MBTA, which is the overall umbrella organization for any kind of rail project into Boston? Already the rest of Massachusetts has to pay for the MBTA that basically just serves Boston and the immediate environs. They're running a $9 billion loss, and I'll have to get the numbers. They're from the antiplanet.org, and it's just showing how bad they are, because they're just like Amtrak. They're not keeping up with their repairs, their maintenance stuff. They're way behind. Their reputation is in the toilet, especially after this particular winter, and things are not going well for them. And I don't see the rush to say, oh, let's go in with this bankrupt organization. No, they don't ever seem to say that. It's always a case of, oh, let's go with the T. Let's just hook into Boston. And you don't hear any talk from the left about their rotten finances. And if we hook in, we're going to be on the hook for that stuff, guys.
And the liberals are always railing against business profits.
Railing.
Railing. Sorry. No pun
that's
intended.
Good. Oh, yes, pun intended.
I don't mean to punish you.
Ooh.
They're always railing against business profits when business profits are anything over 8%. 8% is kind of the industry standard in a competitive marketplace. But when they're running these state-run rail monopolies and state-run industries and socialized activities, they're losing billions and billions of dollars. They're losing outrageous amounts of money. But it's the public sector unions and the union contractors that get most of the money, and yet they want more and more and more and more money. So that if you looked at that as a profit, some of these things are 50 to 60% profit margins in terms of screwing over the taxpayer.
Yeah, just with Amtrak, $22 billion since Amtrak was created is the subsidy amount, I think, that we've been putting into it. Always hearing that, well, the profitability is just around the corner. Anybody ever remember Mike Dukakis, who was helping to run Amtrak? This is why you get $19 hamburgers. And that they can't sell. And they've spent $1 million just on subsidizing their employees' meals.
There are dozens and dozens of these state-run commuter rail boondoggles, light rail, heavy rail, sounder rail, subways, all over the country. They always overestimate ridership by about 50%, and they go into cost overruns by an average of 45%, and they're just rehashing and reworking the same old Soviet-style urban planning with the state-run rail monopolies. Russia gave it up, Poland gave it up, Estonia gave it up. All of these countries have given up on socialized Soviet-style urban planning. North Korea is giving up on this. China is giving up on this. They're giving up on Soviet-style urban planning where they just try to pack everyone into these tightly confined urban development zones and then try to force everyone onto mass transit, and especially these state-run commuter rail boondoggles. And incredibly, the Democrats are still pushing for this policy that even the communist parties in these Eastern European countries have given up on because they see that it is a disaster.
The last of the old Soviet apparatchiks are alive and well in the United States. Isn't that a strange irony?
Do they ever question socialism? Do they
No.
ever question it?
Did you see the latest poll that came out? That the Democrat Party is almost split half and half between those who are in favor of capitalism and those who think socialism is a good idea. And the younger you get, the more in favor of socialism you are. Now, of course, further on, add-on questions in some of the Jay Leno man on the street kind of deal, they have no clue what socialism is. It just feels good. After all, they're wearing the Che shirt. This killer of lots of people in Cuba and Latin America.
Mass murderer.
Yeah, he's a mass murderer. But anyways, the whole idea of governance of everything by a democracy is such a nice sounding thing. And
let me ask you this.
They don't understand Soviet Union. They're too young.
Why should government take your money from you and hold on to it for you?
Shouldn't. But that's what they believe.
Well, there's music back there somewhere. There it is.
Your microphone's too low.
Oh, I had it off for the moment.
We'll get you in the next round.
Coming up, Jazz Shaw. Hot air. Stay tuned. Let me turn off your mic. Did you want to say something, Gar? Real quick? What? Well, hang on. I'm not on the break yet. Let me turn off some microphones. We'll be right back.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jean Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Jean Shaheen and her allies are making false claims about her record on veterans. The truth? Shaheen refused to meet with veterans pushing for reform. She wasn't on the committee that wrote the reform legislation and refused to co-sponsor important VA reforms in the VA Management Accountability Act until after the VA scandal broke. When our veterans needed her, Jean Shaheen was AWOL. Tell Jean Shaheen to stop distorting the truth and fix the VA.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Oh, feel the power.
Oh, I can feel it.
Our moment of triumph approaches. It's
GrokTALK.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
All right, welcome back to Grok Talk. I am Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, Marmar Rogers, and Max Abramson. Full room. Thanks again to David Bozell from For America for spending some time with us talking about the Republican nominees and the need for a good conservative nominee this time around. And we're going to move forward here with the program. We have our next guest on the line. You should know him from Hot Air. His name is Jazz Shaw. Welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, can't complain. Waiting for the thunderstorms. We're getting a little weather today, but other than that, really nice.
Yeah, good. So I know we talked about a dozen different things we could talk about this morning, but while we were chatting earlier in the program, we brought up the subject of Stephanopoulos and then, of course, a couple of the other media personalities and talking heads who have shown up on the list of donors for the Clinton Foundation, and we came up with the term Stephanoctopus. So we think that I don't know. I want to get
That's
that.
Not bad.
I want to get.
I've been going with Generous George myself.
George. Yeah, that works too. It works too. I don't know. We got to start hashtagging the heck out of these anyway. So we have that. Of course, there's plenty of Clinton stuff to talk about. I know you mentioned Tammy Duckworth. I think is that Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois Senate.
Yeah. Okay. There's that. So much stuff to talk about. I don't even know where to start. Anybody?
Well, obviously, we should start in Las Vegas.
Okay, let's start there.
Because, last night, the big news, two things that I used to love quite a bit, boxing and politics, intersected. Of course, those are both things which are much on the decline in recent years. And, Mitt Romney fought Evander Holyfield.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yes, he did. Did you watch?
Just got the video. No, I didn't have access to it live, but we had the video this morning. So.
Oh, cool. So I expect that's going to go up.
Oh, yeah, we'll have that up this afternoon at Hot Air. It was a freak show, I got to tell you. But let me just say, you may not have thought much of Mitt as a candidate, possibly not even as a conservative, but the guy is in shockingly good shape for his age. And he knocked Holyfield down in the first round. It was impressive.
Wow.
Knockdown or a dive.
I'm sure Holyfield helped him along a little, but I'm equally sure that Mitt was as well prepped as anybody could be.
Well, you're so suspicious. I prefer to think, Holyfield was never that good to start with, and Mitt has a 2-inch reach advantage on him. So, it was pretty nice. It was a lot of fun. They raised a lot of money for charity, and Mitt's corner threw in the towel in the second round of 3. I think he was just getting tired at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, he isn't a spring chicken anymore. I know Evander isn't either, but at least he'd been doing that most of his life, so that kind of gives you an advantage.
Isn't
Yeah,
Holyfield
and
the one
he's
who knocked out
still
Tyson?
working out. Holyfield was in pretty good shape, really.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's going to be contending again anytime soon. But anyway, that was just our fun story for the weekend. I thought it was nice they did a charity event. I like boxing, so it was fun.
That is good. All right, so let's talk about Illinois for a couple minutes. Tammy Duckworth, is she? I think you wrote about this. Was it yesterday, day before? Maybe it was last night. I ran out of. There it is, right in front of me. Democrat. Everybody was thinking she's the woman, and now they're having second thoughts. Is that right?
Yeah, they would like to take a shot at Mark Kirk's seat, and that's not a crazy idea for the Democrats because Illinois is touch and go for the GOP in the best of years. Mm-hmm. In a presidential year, the Democrats tend to get pretty high turnout because Chicago just shows up, in massive numbers, or, living and dead. And they get tons of Democrats showing up to vote. So that's a rough race to start with. And Kirk's favorability rating is positive at this point, but it's only a plurality. About more than half, or almost half, the people don't express an opinion about him. So that's a danger sign. He's more popular than unpopular, but he just hasn't really staked out a name for himself. He doesn't have one of those soaring popularity numbers, so he could be in trouble. They decided immediately on Duckworth because she's got the whole backstory, Iraq veteran, Purple Heart, wounded in battle, very popular in the party, and that looked like a no-brainer until the Chicago inside political team stepped up and they said, we really ought to have somebody who's black. Which was just, and they made no bones about it. That was exactly the reason they gave. And they said, well, no, we need to come up with a black candidate. So they came up with this woman, I'm drawing a blank, her name is Zopp, I think, her last name.
Andrea Zopp, Andrea.
Andrea Zopp, yeah. And the Chicago Tribune went to interview her, and they're like, well, why do you think you're the qualified person? And she turned right around and said, well, I'm a black woman, so I bring the right perspective to this race and the representation that we need. It was like no talk of qualifications or anything. It was just, well, I'm the right candidate. So I'm getting out the popcorn at this point because Duckworth ran a pretty nasty primary for her House seat last time. And apparently they've already started digging up stuff on this woman and starting to feed that to the press through the back door. So I don't know if Kirk will hold on to the seat, but a dirty primary never helps anybody. And if nothing else, like I said, get out the popcorn because it could be an interesting, Democrat on Democrat, hot, dirty action going on out in Illinois.
And who better to reap the full rewards of the Democrat identity politics segmentation, setting us all against each other and in a sense of tribalism we haven't seen for centuries, is the Democrats in Illinois. You just got to love it.
And particularly with the Chicago overtones, which just adds more spice to it because the fight's going to be fought largely in Chicago. I mean, Kirk's support is, almost entirely in the southern part of the state and the more rural areas, but much like New York, the difference between upstate and New York City, you get swamped by the city if the Democrats go and turn out, bring out your dead and all that. It's hard to beat those numbers.
But do you, and even though I'm making fun of the identity politics, it really has become, I think, a huge blight on politics where the Democrats have embraced it because when you segment people, you can set them against each other. But do you think it very dangerous that we see the slow movement of the Republicans to adopt the same kind of outlook, at which point it's like, you can't outgift the Democrats, even if the Republicans want to do that? Are we going to just put ourselves as permanent losers as the parties at the national level start to adopt the same kind of deal?
Well, in certain areas, I think there is a move towards more populist sentiment and more populist legislative proposals. It's called populist for a reason. People like free stuff, I'm sorry to say. No matter what the price tag is for that, no matter if there's an $18 trillion deficit and, just paying the interest on that is going to start to cripple us before too long if it keeps going up. But, somebody who's sitting at home and wants their free phone or whatever it is that they're going to be getting this month with whatever proposal is on the table, and and being told, no, you won't have to pay for it, we'll just, put it on the credit card. I'm sorry to say, we've had a couple generations of people who think that sounds like a great deal.
Salmon?
Very much so. And you mentioned Obama phone, and it's interesting. Somebody put up an evolution graph of the phones for the last 30 years. Shrink, 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 shrink. And then all of a sudden they got bigger. And the comment underneath was all the better for selfies. So are Obama phones bigger and better for better selfies too?
I have not actually seen an Obama phone, so I can't comment on that. I do know, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and this isn't really a political discussion, but I don't understand. I was pretty happy when phones got small, and I have a Droid myself that I can fit in a front shirt pocket very easily. But now I see these new iPhones coming out, and they're getting to be the size of small tablets. And it's like, well, if you're going to carry that around and it doesn't fit anywhere except in your briefcase, why don't you just bring your laptop? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I bought a phablet, I bought a Kindle Fire, which has a 6-inch screen, and it was perfect. It was the perfect size for sitting there in the State House, reading bills, reading the House calendar, receiving emails, communicating with other reps. And the problem is just slightly too big for this front pocket. However, it just happened to fit the inside pocket, so it ended up being the perfect size. And the problem is, I dropped it, and the screen cracked. And it was only an 18-inch drop. I don't recommend them. It's not that they aren't durable enough. It's that they're just too damn heavy. I think
LG G3 fits in your front pocket, and it's pretty damn big, as you can see. So anyway,
well, but the Kindle Fire is only $99.
That's true, and that was
what, $600?
That was a 2-year plan with all kinds of nonsense attached. Anyway, we're digressing just a little bit.
So $18 trillion in debt. USA Today 2 years ago ran a story on the front page. It wasn't just the $18 trillion in debt. It was another $26 trillion in unfunded entitlement obligations, another $5 or $6 trillion in unfunded state and local pension obligations. New Hampshire has it's estimated between $4 and $14 billion unfunded pension liability. So you add it all up, it was something like $62 trillion, or about $200,000 per person.
Yeah, and in fact, when Glenn Beck was running the numbers on Fox a few years back, he had already estimated that the total unfunded liabilities of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, etc., were heading north of $100 trillion at that point if you added all of the pieces together. And I'm sure it's much, much worse. And the thing is, these are all commitments to give now, pay later in terms of contracts, especially union labor contracts. And even the unionistas don't realize they can't possibly get what they've been promised. They'd be better off negotiating something that's affordable.
Yeah. So, Jazz, how are you going to solve that whole problem in 30 seconds?
Well, I guess burning the cities down isn't practical.
Not even the Democrat cities?
Well, all the big cities really are Democrat cities, at least in my part of the country and all along the Northeast and the Midwest and all that. But I have been writing quite a bit lately when you mention unions, and we're talking about Illinois. That's a perfect example, is that they are struggling, both the entire state and at a lower level, the city of Chicago, with this massive unfunded pension scheme for the unions. And the unions were so successful over the decades there that not only did they get these sweetheart deals one after another by being the people who financed all the elections and essentially owning all the Democrats who got elected, they were more successful than the other states because they got a constitutional amendment passed a couple of decades ago and wrote it into the Constitution saying that, in pretty much in so many words, that a pension was a God-given right, and once a pension had been assigned, it shall never be removed or diminished. And that's in the state. And when they just arranged a deal to try to cut down some of the benefits and whatnot to try to get at least close to where they might be able to keep their head above water paying all this off. And they were immediately challenged in court by the unions, and the state Supreme Court came down in no time at all and said, nope, it's in the Constitution, you can't do that. Should have planned ahead. Sorry.
So now they look at the Constitution.
Now they look at the Constitution.
But this is a state constitution that was modified specifically to lock in the benefits that they knew would eventually be challenged.
Exactly, and the unions were just so ingenious. I mean, it sounds disgusting to any sort of fiscal conservative, but you almost have to give a tip of your hat to the lengths that they went to. They set up a plan in Chicago where there was a rule that was in place only briefly, saying that, and it was passed as like some rider on something else, saying that you would qualify for a lifetime teacher's pension if you served as a teacher at all, and that meant as little as 1 day. Wow. And they literally had a group of union bosses who got themselves sent out as substitute teachers for 1 day, literally 1 day, and then shortly after that moved on to their retirement and filed a claim, and they had, on top of their normal union pension and other things, they got this teacher's pension separate and above for the rest of their life. The first guy that did it got taken to court, and the judge was just so offended by this, he said, no, this is ridiculous, we're going to strike this down, you're not going to get this pension. His union lawyers took them to court, and they pointed at that constitutional clause, and he won. And he taught 1 day as a substitute teacher, and he now has a pension for the rest of, it's not bad either, it's like $39,000 a year on top of his other pensions for the rest of his life for teaching 1 day.
Wow. All right, we're going to take a short break, Jazz. Stay there. We will be right back.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
This is GrokTALK. You know it is because we were talking on the break, and you might have heard us. I don't know. We've been leaving mics open all day.
We've got too many mics.
We've got that mic down there at the end of the table, but we're here to talk to Jazz Shaw. And I was just wondering, Jazz, if that's the rule in the law and the Constitution in Illinois, what's the arc on this? I mean, will the people eventually rise up and change their Constitution, or will Illinois just become this empty state with pensioned unioners in it who can't collect any money?
Well, it's going to go one way or the other. The new governor ran as part of his platform was to push for a referendum to get an amendment to the Constitution to get that that old section thrown out because it's blocking any progress. Good luck with that, because how you're going to get enough signatures to counteract all of the Democrats and the signatures they can magically produce. I don't see how that happens. The alternative is basically he will be forced to go along with the plan that's already been proposed, which was, once again, to raise all the taxes. So they want to jack up the taxes to pay for all these various union benefits, and they have already taxed people out of their state. People are fleeing. Businesses have closed. Chicago is turning into a wasteland. So yeah, it'll eventually be people. The other alternative is that, much like Detroit, they can go into bankruptcy. Yeah. Now, that's the one option that they may have, because a federal bankruptcy court could potentially override that and say, well, the money does not exist, so Constitution be damned, you can't get blood out of a stone. So they may have to go all the way down the drain into the trap before somebody can drag them a little ways back out.
Yeah, I have a good friend, worked with him for years, and after he left the company, he and I have stayed in contact, and he moved out of Illinois specifically for the taxes. He's now in John Kasich's home state of Ohio, and he said, I just couldn't afford it anymore. He said they kept on going up and up and up, and he wasn't even in Chicago primary, or right in Chicago itself, but just outside of it, but still had to pay for all of the fiscal malfeasance. And he said, I got tired of it, and I sold the house, and we left. In fact, he actually moved before he could sell the house. He said, I just couldn't take it anymore on the income side. He said, I put up with the property taxes just because I couldn't sell the house right away. And it's going to get harder for people to leave that stuff, but leave they will.
It depends how far out of the city you move, because the city boundaries are not the limit of that particular machine. It's really Cook County as a whole, which is a huge sprawling county,
right.
Which covers the outlying areas, and they have county taxes out there, which put state taxes in other places to shame. And just the level of corruption in Cook County it's legendary. I mean, New Orleans laughs at them,
Mike?
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe it's time for a new secession movement for states to divorce their largest cities and prosper. Just imagine Illinois without Chicago, without Cook County. Just imagine Massachusetts without Greater Boston.
Well, people have been imagining New York without New York City for a very long time. It was brought up as early that I can recall as the 1970s. There was a movement to try to just shear off New York City into a 51st state, which would be tremendous for upstate, because then we could start selling them all of our water instead of them just draining all of our water, which is a huge, huge, huge issue in New York. Not to mention the fact that we get hit with all their taxes to pay for all the benefits that go on in New York City. And the upstate area, which is largely rural and some smaller cities, very widely conservative, lower cost of living, it's a very nice place to live if you didn't have that gigantic Manhattan monkey on your back. Most recently, if you guys want to go Google the news, I happen to live upstate, by the way, and I'm in the southern tier right along the Pennsylvania border around the middle of the state. And because of the fracking moratorium and the refusal of the state to allow any new jobs or people to make money off their land through energy development, they've had a secession movement that started for 4 counties, including mine, and they want to secede and join Pennsylvania.
How do you feel about that?
I think it would be a wonderful idea, but once again, you have to get the legislature to agree to it. You could probably get the legislature in Pennsylvania to agree, but the New York legislature is still controlled by New York City, and that's never going to happen. So it's drawn a lot of mocking and tons of news coverage in the state, and it would certainly be wonderful. I would be happy to live with 1/3 of the taxes and be able to lease the land to some of my relatives around here for drilling, but no, I don't see it happening.
Is that Binghamton?
Binghamton.
Yep.
Binghamton. I was going to say I was born in Massachusetts, but I grew up in central and western New York, outside of Rochester, and I went to college in Buffalo. So I understand that most of New York has absolutely nothing in it. It's vineyards, it's woods, it's mountains, and most people are like, New York, oh, I think about the city, or maybe they think about Albany, or maybe they think about Buffalo, and maybe Syracuse, because they have a college there with some teams that do okay. But most people don't have a clue that New York is this great, big, sprawling, open space. I always say, you're from New York. You go, oh, where in the city are you from? I'm not from the city.
We have a camp up in the North Country. When you get up past Syracuse and the I-90 corridor, you get into the Adirondack Park and the mountains up there, and there are areas on our way to camp you can drive for literally 30, 40 miles, and there is not a building. Mm-hmm. There's just this one road that goes through there, and it's animals, the occasional campsite. Yeah. There's a lot of the state like that. It's really wonderful. It's just a shame we have this huge wart sitting down on the island by the ocean.
It's interesting that you brought up the secession of several of the towns and counties and wanting to move because of the onerous regulations and the inability to do as one believes. But we've seen this all over the nation where either towns or a whole series of counties, and the biggest example is the movement afoot, or at least the idea of subdividing California into 6 different, more ideologically aligned areas. Do you see this philosophy ever gaining strength. Obviously, we had the Civil War where the states just wanted to secede altogether, but this inter-nation secession just by realigning to somebody else close enough. Do you think anything will ever come of it? Because I've been watching this happen for like 4 years. And a lot of people are getting, rather ticked that they can't get out from underneath the policies they don't like.
I'm sorry, it's almost the same answer. It would be wonderful to live in that world, to think that people had those kinds of options and choices and a rational discussion could be had. But in California, you run into the same situation, and it seems to be duplicated in Illinois, in New York, in Massachusetts. Wherever you go, there's a fair number of people, generally the ones who live in the lower cost of living, more rural, more conservative areas, who can see the benefits of that, but the rules are rigged against you, and you have to overcome the weight of the large numbers of people that you're trying to get rid of, and they have no incentive to do that because they're the ones benefiting from the system as it currently is. So I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but just in terms of prognostication and my own personal opinion, I'm not hopeful that we'll see anything like that in my lifetime.
Okay. So, on a national basis, I've read more than one place that the United States is so philosophically different that it would actually function better as a sort of layered federal system of maybe 5 regional governments and 1 national government for overall defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, as in the country class wants rid of the city class or the ruling class.
I think it's probably the same problem.
Yes, I'm sure it won't happen, but it's become close to ungovernable, and the nearer they approach a majority vote for everything instead of an intentionally layered system, senators by the states, electoral college. As they try to do away with those layers, essentially we end up with a giant pure democracy with 538 people voted for en masse. It's going to become ungovernable.
The genius.
I think the problem with what you're talking about there is having discussions about trimming off a city or something and creating an extra state. That's something that's currently possible under the existing Constitution. Maybe not probable or likely, but it's something that there are mechanisms in place if they meet certain requirements that it could be done. What you're talking about would basically require a new constitutional convention and restructuring the entire governmental structure of the country from the ground up. And I don't think I'd be too thrilled to jump on that bandwagon because you never know what's going to shake out of a constitutional convention.
Just look at the people pushing it.
One of the geniuses of the constitutional system is that you have you allow 50 different solutions for 50 different states, and not only decentralizing things down to the states, but that each individual city or town can come up with the solutions that work best for that city or town.
Well, that should still work in theory, but I think that ship has sailed, as has this ship, because we've come to the end of our segment and our program. You guys can, listeners and podcast listeners, you can check out Jazz Shaw at Hot Air, and his Twitter handle is Jazz Shaw. And we want to thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys. Nice talking to you, even about depressing, horrible subjects.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
Take care.
Bye-bye. All right, that's it. Don't take your headset off without telling me. You do it every week. Then I get a big... Now you can take it off. Thank you. Well, that's another week of GrokTALK. We'll be back next week with more guests, more conversations, more politics, more culture, and more GrokTALK. Take it easy.
Yeah, baby!
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results.
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change.
Jean Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Senator Jean Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPack.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
All of the music on this program comes to us through Creative Commons licensing from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers, and not necessarily those of CNHT, GrokTALK.com, or anyone else for that matter.
GrokTALK.